The Day the Earth Stood Still stands as a monument in science fiction cinema, a stark black and white warning delivered to Cold War America that somehow grows more relevant with each passing decade. But beneath its alien visitor narrative and the iconic robot Gort lies a web of hidden meanings, production battles, and performance choices that most viewers never fully decode. What if I told you the film's most powerful messages weren't about nuclear war at all? What if the seemingly straightforward science fiction classic was actually a deeply subversive text, one that deliberately hid its most radical ideas in plain sight to avoid studio censorship and public backlash? Let's pull back the curtain on this landmark film and examine what the cast and creative team were really trying to tell us. The secrets hiding in the performances, the deliberate visual cues placed by director Robert Wise, and the studio battles that nearly derailed the entire production. This is the hidden layer of The Day the Earth Stood Still that transforms how you see the film, the coded messages, and creative choices that most fans never figured out. At its core, The Day the Earth Stood Still presents itself as a cautionary tale about nuclear proliferation. An alien, named Klaatu, arrives on Earth with his imposing robot companion Gort, bearing a message for all of humanity. Cease your violent ways, or face annihilation. But this surface reading barely scratches the true complexity of what the film's creators embedded in their work. The film's deeper message reveals itself through three interconnected themes that the cast and creative team deliberately wove into the fabric of the narrative. First, a radical critique of American exceptionalism during the height of post-war confidence. Second, a spiritual allegory that director Robert Wise and actor Michael Rennie constructed with surgical precision. And third, a subversive commentary on race relations in America that the studio executives never fully grasped until after release. Producer Julian Blaustein and screenwriter Edmund H. North worked from Harry Bates's short story, Farewell to the Master, but transformed it into something far more ambitious. North later confirmed that the Christ allegory was intentional from the earliest drafts, with Klaatu arriving as a being of peace, taking the human name Carpenter, dying, and being resurrected. We didn't announce our symbolism, North revealed years later. We kept it subdued enough that those who didn't want to see it wouldn't. But the religious symbolism was merely a Trojan horse for even more controversial ideas. The film emerged from a Hollywood under intense scrutiny from the House Un-American Activities Committee, where any hint of anti-American sentiment could end careers overnight. Yet somehow, this film managed to deliver one of the most pointed critiques of American military policy and Cold War paranoia ever to emerge from a major studio in this era. The cast understood exactly what they were part of. And as we'll see, they made choices that amplified these messages in ways that would slip past the censors, but registered deeply in the American psyche. Michael Rennie was not 20th Century Fox's first choice to play Klaatu. The studio had initially pursued Claude Rains and Spencer Tracy for the role of the alien messenger. When they landed on the relatively unknown British actor, they stumbled into casting perfection, though they didn't realize it at the time. Rennie brought something crucial to Klaatu that American actors couldn't provide: a genuine foreignness. His crisp British accent and lean, angular features gave him an otherworldly quality that American audiences would register as both familiar and subtly other. Rennie understood this dynamic intimately. I played him as a man, not a visitor from space, Rennie explained years later. A man with tremendous knowledge, yes, but with human feelings too. The foreignness would take care of itself. What fans rarely recognize is how deliberately Rennie calibrated his performance. He studied the movements of renowned physicists and mathematicians, incorporating their economy of motion and precise gestures. Watch how Rennie never wastes a single movement on screen. Every turn of his head, every hand gesture serves a purpose. This wasn't just good acting. It was a carefully constructed portrayal of a being who understands efficiency on a cosmic level. Patricia Neal, playing Helen Benson, created the perfect counterpoint to Rennie's alien precision. Neal infused her character with a grounded humanity that makes the audience's connection to Klaatu possible. What's fascinating is how Neal later revealed she approached the role as if Helen were encountering not an alien, but a divine being, playing subtle notes of awe that registered subconsciously with viewers. "I didn't play fear," Neal said in a 1991 interview. "I played recognition, as if something in her had always been waiting for this encounter." The tension between Rennie's otherworldly presence and Neal's earthy humanity creates the film's emotional backbone. But it also highlights the profound loneliness that both actors built into their performances. Klaatu as the isolated messenger, Helen as the widow, raising her son alone in a world obsessed with external threats. Behind Rennie's calm exterior, he crafted a character carrying the weight of an impossible task. The subtle strain in his voice during the final monologue wasn't just good acting. It was the culmination of a carefully built performance, showing a being who understands he's likely failed in his mission. This dimension of resignation, barely perceptible beneath his commanding presence, is what gives the film's conclusion its devastating power. And it's this subtle layering of emotions beneath the science fiction veneer that most fans never fully decode. The journey from Harry Bates' short story, Farewell to the Master, to the screenplay we know today reveals perhaps the most dramatic behind-the-scenes battle in the film's creation. What most fans don't realize is how radically different the original source material was, and how the transformation occurred despite studio resistance. Originally published in Astounding Science Fiction in 1940, Bates's story featured Gort, called Gnut in the story, as the actual master, with the humanoid figure serving as his messenger, the opposite of the film's dynamic. Screenwriter Edmund H. North, along with producer Julian Blaustein, saw the potential for something far more meaningful than a standard alien invasion story. North, who would later win an Oscar for Patton, deliberately inverted the power dynamic to create a parable about humanity's relationship with technology. But this was just the beginning of their transformative work. The studio executives initially rejected North's first draft as too intellectual and too preachy. They wanted a straightforward science fiction thriller with a clear American triumph at the conclusion. What happened next changed everything. North and Blaustein didn't back down. Instead, they cleverly doubled down on their subversive elements while appearing to simplify the narrative. They enhanced the Christ symbolism, knowing religious allegory would be difficult for the studio to overtly reject in McCarthy-era America. They added more action sequences with the military to satisfy the studio's desire for tension, while simultaneously making those same sequences a critique of military thinking. The most brilliant stroke came in their handling of the film's central message. Rather than diluting Klaatu's warning about nuclear proliferation, they made it more universal, expanding it to a broader commentary on humanity's violent nature, thus making it harder to read as a specific criticism of American foreign policy, even though that's precisely what it was. Director Robert Wise, fresh off editing Citizen Kane and directing The Setup, recognized the script's potential immediately. Wise later confessed, "I saw it as an opportunity to say something important, while appearing to just make an entertaining science fiction picture. The best messages are the ones that slip past your defenses." The screenplay went through 11 revisions, with North fighting to preserve the core message with each draft. What fans never realized is that many of Klaatu's most powerful lines, including the famous final speech, were actually strengthened through this process of studio resistance, as North found increasingly elegant ways to embed the film's critique in seemingly innocuous science fiction trappings. The final screenplay achieved something remarkable. It satisfied the studio's desire for an accessible thriller while preserving its intellectual core. And in the process, it created a template for how science fiction could smuggle profound social commentary past the watchful eyes of studio censors. The physical production of The Day the Earth Stood Still unfolded against a backdrop of genuine Cold War paranoia that mirrored the film's narrative in unsettling ways. What most viewers never realize is how the film's creation was itself shadowed by FBI surveillance and political pressure that threatened the careers of everyone involved. The film began shooting in spring 1951, just as Senator Joseph McCarthy's anti-communist investigations were reaching their zenith. Director Robert Wise later revealed that FBI agents actually visited the set, ostensibly to observe the production of a film about an outside force threatening America. The irony wasn't lost on the cast and crew. "We were making a film about paranoia while experiencing it firsthand," Wise recalled. There were genuine concerns that some might interpret our story as too sympathetic to communism. The idea of a collective of planets governing the galaxy had obvious parallels. These pressures created a tense atmosphere on set that paradoxically enhanced the performances. Patricia Neal noted years later, "The fear you see on screen when the military surrounds Klaatu, that wasn't entirely acting. We all felt a bit surrounded ourselves." The physical challenges of the production were equally demanding. The shooting schedule was compressed into just 32 days, with complex special effects that had to be achieved without modern technology. The iconic robot Gort, played by 7/7 Dorman Locke Martin, presented particular difficulties. Martin lacked the physical strength his imposing height suggested, and could only wear the stifling rubber suit for minutes at a time before nearly passing out. Locke Martin was discovered working as a doorman at Grauman's Chinese Theater. Despite his height, he couldn't lift Patricia Neal for the rescue scene, requiring clever camera tricks and a wire harness that left Neal badly bruised after multiple takes. The Washington, D.C. scenes presented another layer of difficulty. The production couldn't secure permission to film extensively in the Capitol, requiring Wise to send a second unit to capture brief establishing shots, while most scenes were filmed on Fox's backlot and around Los Angeles. The seamless integration of these locations is a testament to Wise's visual ingenuity. Most viewers never notice the geographical sleight of hand. Bernard Herrmann's innovative score, featuring electric theremin, was initially considered too strange by studio executives. Wise had to fight to preserve Herrmann's unsettling compositions, recognizing how the otherworldly sound perfectly complemented the film's themes. Herrmann later revealed he deliberately avoided romantic cues, focusing instead on creating music that felt removed from human experience. The pressure cooker production schedule, political surveillance, and technical challenges coalesced into something unexpected. They focused the cast and crew with an intensity that translated directly to screen. The urgency you feel in the film, the sense that time is running out, wasn't just good storytelling. It was the reality of a production racing against both the clock and the political climate of its era. And that urgency became embedded in every frame of the finished film. The visual language of "The Day the Earth Stood Still" contains layers of meaning that casual viewers often miss entirely. Director Robert Wise, with his background as an editor on Citizen Kane, constructed a visual narrative filled with deliberate symbolism and subtle visual cues that transform the viewing experience once recognized. Watch closely as Klaatu first enters Helen Benson's boarding house. The camera placement and lighting creates a subtle halo effect around Michael Rennie's head, the first of many visual Christ references that Wise incorporated throughout the film. This isn't accidental composition. It's deliberate visual storytelling that reinforces the script's religious allegory without ever making it explicit. Even more fascinating is how Wise uses reflective surfaces throughout the film. Notice how often Klaatu is shown in mirrors or reflected in windows, a visual motif suggesting his role as a reflection of humanity's better nature. Conversely, military and government officials are frequently filmed with harsh overhead lighting that creates shadowed eyes, subtly dehumanizing them. "I wanted visual distinctions between different philosophies," Wise explained years later. "The lighting literally illuminates who sees clearly and who doesn't." The production design contains equally meaningful details. Klaatu's spaceship interior features curved walls and minimal ornamentation, a stark contrast to the angular architecture and cluttered decoration of human environments. This wasn't merely aesthetic, it was a commentary on different approaches to existence. The alien design suggests harmony and efficiency, while human spaces reflect competition and excess. Perhaps the most overlooked detail is in the costume evolution of Klaatu himself. His transition from alien jumpsuit to human business attire is not just a disguise, but a visual metaphor for his attempt to understand humanity from within. The suit he wears, noticeably different in cut from those worn by American characters, maintains his otherness while suggesting an attempt at connection. Sam Jaffe, playing Professor Barnhart, created another layer of visual coding through his Einstein-like appearance. This wasn't mere mimicry, but a deliberate choice to evoke the image of scientific genius who warned about nuclear weapons while believing in humanity's potential. Precisely the dual message at the heart of the film. The most powerful visual moment comes during Klaatu's visit to Arlington Cemetery. The endless rows of white crosses create a visual indictment of warfare without a single word of dialogue. When Klaatu remarks that he was interested in the history of your wars, the visual composition has already delivered that history's verdict. These carefully constructed visual elements create a secondary narrative that runs parallel to the spoken dialogue, a narrative that speaks directly to the viewer's subconscious. Once you see these patterns, the film transforms from a simple alien visitation story into a rich text where every shadow, reflection, and composition carries meaning. And it's this hidden visual language that most fans never fully decode, even after multiple viewings. The most intense conflict during the creation of The Day the Earth Stood Still wasn't between Klaatu and the military forces surrounding him. It was between the filmmakers and 20th Century Fox executives who didn't fully grasp what kind of film they were making until it was too late to change course. Studio head Darryl F. Zanuck initially approved the project believing it would be a straightforward science fiction adventure, following the success of destination films like When Worlds Collide. What he didn't anticipate was producer Julian Blaustein's determination to create a film that delivered a pointed critique of Cold War militarism and American exceptionalism. We had to be careful not to show our full hand too early, Blaustein revealed in a later interview. We knew we were making a film with a message that would be controversial in certain circles. The most heated battles centered around Klaatu's final monologue, the moment when the film's message is made explicit. Early drafts were even more pointed in their critique of nuclear proliferation and military thinking. Studio notes repeatedly pushed for a softer approach, with one executive writing, "Can we make this less accusatory toward American policy specifically?" Screenwriter Edmund H. North and director Robert Wise fought back by embedding the critique more deeply in science fiction trappings. Rather than diluting the message, they disguised it by making Klaatu's warning apply to all of humanity rather than specifically to American and Soviet leadership. They created plausible deniability while actually strengthening the universal application of their critique. The religious symbolism became another flashpoint. Some executives expressed concern that the Christ allegory, with Klaatu dying and being resurrected, might offend religious audiences. Wise countered by arguing that the spiritual dimension would actually make the film more palatable to mainstream America, not less. He was proven right when religious leaders later embraced the film for its moral message. Patricia Neal found herself caught in another aspect of the behind-the-scenes conflict. Studio executives pushed for a romantic subplot between Helen and Klaatu to soften the film's intellectual edge. Both Neal and Michael Rennie resisted this direction, deliberately playing their scenes with a connection based on mutual respect and understanding rather than romantic attraction. "We knew a love story would trivialize the message," Neal explained. The relationship needed to be about recognition of shared values, not romance. The most telling battle came over the film's conclusion. Early drafts had a more optimistic ending. with clearer indications that humanity would heed Klaatu's warning. Wise and North fought for the more ambiguous ending we see in the final film, where Klaatu leaves Earth with his warning delivered, but no certainty that it will be followed. That ambiguity was crucial, Wise insisted. We wanted audiences to leave the theater with the responsibility still resting on their shoulders, not with a false sense that everything would be fine. This creative struggle resulted in something rare, a studio film that manages to be both entertaining and intellectually challenging, accessible to mass audiences while delivering a sophisticated critique of the very society consuming it. The film succeeded precisely because of this tension, not in spite of it. And that tension continues to give it power decades after the Cold War's end. Perhaps the most overlooked aspect of The Day the Earth Stood Still lies in a single word, a name that transforms the entire meaning of the film once its significance is understood. When Klaatu takes on the alias Mr. Carpenter while hiding among humans, most viewers recognize this as a nod to Jesus' profession. But the Christ allegory goes much deeper, in ways that reshape our understanding of every scene that follows. The name Carpenter wasn't just a casual biblical reference. It was the key that unlocked the film's most subversive message. By establishing Klaatu as a Christ figure, the filmmakers created a startling implication. If the Christ-like figure in this narrative is an alien warning about humanity's violent nature, what does that suggest about how far humanity has strayed from its professed religious ideals? This naming choice created a brilliant narrative trap. Those most likely to reject the film's anti-militaristic message, conservative, religious Americans, would be the same viewers most sensitive to the Christ symbolism. They could hardly dismiss a character designed to echo Jesus without contradicting their own values. We were using their own symbolic language to make our point, Edmund North explained years later. If they embraced the religious parallels, they'd have to wrestle with the message about violence as well. Michael Rennie understood this dimension completely, infusing his performance with subtle messianic qualities. Notice how he often speaks in parables and questions rather than direct statements, a teaching style that echoes biblical accounts. His interactions with the young boy Bobby, played by Billy Gray, parallel Jesus' admonition to honor children's wisdom. The irony of this Christ allegory extends even further when we consider the historical context. The film was released in 1951, when American politicians routinely invoked Christian values while simultaneously building ever more destructive nuclear arsenals. By presenting an alien Christ figure who explicitly condemns this militarism, the film highlighted this contradiction without ever directly stating it. The resurrection scene, where Gort retrieves Klaatu's body and restores him to life, completes this symbolic framework. But it adds another layer. In this version, technology serves as the agent of resurrection. This suggests a reconciliation between scientific advancement and spiritual values that was radical for its time and remains relevant today. Patricia Neal's character gains new significance through this lens as well. As a single mother who recognizes Klaatu's true nature and aids him despite personal risk, she embodies a Mary Magdalene figure, the human who sees the truth when others cannot. Her final glance upward as the spaceship departs isn't just good cinematography. It's the completion of a carefully constructed religious tableau. This naming choice, this single word Carpenter, transformed what might have been a simple adventure film into a profound spiritual and political statement. It allowed the filmmakers to critique American militarism using the very religious framework that many use to justify it. And most remarkably, they managed this subversion while creating a film that studio executives believed was sufficiently conventional for mass audiences. The Day the Earth Stood Still defied the conventions of 1950s science fiction in one crucial aspect that transformed its impact: its deliberate visual restraint. While contemporaries like War of the Worlds and Them relied heavily on spectacle and monster reveals, director Robert Wise took a radically different approach that most viewers never consciously register. but feel deeply. The film's most powerful demonstration of alien technology, the moment when electricity stops worldwide, is shown primarily through its effects rather than the cause. No energy beams, no elaborate control panels, no visual pyrotechnics. Instead, Wise gives us stalled cars, stopped elevators, and the human reactions to this unprecedented event. I wanted the audience to feel the powerlessness, Wise later explained. If I showed the mechanics of how it was done, it would become just another effect. By showing only the results, it becomes something more profound. A demonstration of how dependent we are on systems we take for granted. This approach reaches its pinnacle in the handling of Gort, the robot companion. Contemporary films would have exploited Gort's destructive capabilities with extended sequences of mayhem. Instead, Wise gives us brief, clinical demonstrations of power,